The following is a special presentation of Tony Curry Radio. Keep your mission on your mind and your mind on your mission. This is Mission Minded with Michael Coleman.
Welcome back to another Mission Minded. Keep your mind and your mission, your mind. As you look on the left-hand side of the screen, if you're watching our YouTube channel on Tony Curry Radio, which is where we're getting most of our viewers and listeners. People like to see our beautiful mugs every single week. Michael Coleman, the CEO of the Heart of Alabama Food Bank. Michael, what's been going on? Happy holidays. We record this show 6 days before Thanksgiving. It's hard to believe that Turkey Day is coming up.
Yeah, so always a big time in the food banking world when we get to the holidays. Primarily because, and of course, everybody in the audience knows it's something about gathering around the table to break bread together, to get caught up on what's going on with the year. Sometimes that's the only time you get to see families during Thanksgiving and Christmas, like cousins and aunts and uncles and nieces and nephews. And so it's really a special time. And we just know that there's a lot of people, due to a lot of different factors going on in their life, that are struggling to be able to have enough to be able to provide a good meal. And so it's just part of our job. And so we prepare for this way back in the spring so that we can deliver an adequate meal. We can't supply all the bells and whistles that you would like to. But we make sure there's plenty of good protein, either through turkeys or hams, and so we have a lot of people. And sometimes I fail to mention this, but part of our distribution network is we provide it going out to 35 counties. Well, there are agencies, there's pantries in the through churches and through other nonprofits in our communities that actually come get it from us and do the heavy lifting of getting it out to the people in need. And so without them, we certainly wouldn't be able to serve the capacity we do. So we're very thankful for them. And they do it the same reason we do it, because we're motivated to help overcome. This is a societal problem that gets highlighted during this time of year.
Well, let me start right there. You bring up highlight. This is, certainly you need more food, I would assume, during this time period, not only because the weather changed a little bit, but because it does center around eating. It was funny. My 12-year-old daughter the other day, she said, "What happened to Thanksgiving?" I said, "What do you mean?" She goes, "When is it?" I said, "It's next week." And she said, "It's like we've just totally forgotten about it." Christmas has just come so early. And this year, particularly, I think it has a lot to do with the election. I think once the election was over with on November 6th, I think everyone was just so happy to move forward. Everyone wants to celebrate and just forget about things for a while. And I think they started doing Christmas. But yeah, Thanksgiving, super, super important. So with this being the day everyone eats, and you obviously are the feeding funnel of people that are inefficient in that area, how can you be highlighted? What do you do different? And explain to people out there that don't understand exactly what you do, what can people expect to get for Thanksgiving? And do you get new quote unquote customers based on what you do for Thanksgiving?
Well, yeah, the customer base, that's really not seasonal. And there's so many misunderstandings about food insecurity, especially if you're somebody blessed enough, and the majority of us are, to where we go home at night, and if we need groceries, we'll run to the grocery store, we'll run to the fast food place. But every day we have stories communicated to us. There's a woman on disability who has 4 children at home, and just literally can't provide. She's had health issues that brought about the disability. It's just there's people that get into foster care. And when I say foster care, not just in the general foster care system, but maybe a grandparent who's retired and on a fixed income, and now their daughter is going to lose their children if they don't, take them in. And so it's an unexpected kind of foster care of your family. There are people who, I think I told this story not too long ago. First time in the food line, 84-year-old man with an 80-year-old wife. They are lifelong, hardworking people, have been productive members of their community. He has medication that went in 1 month from $750 a month to $1,200 a month, and now that you all of a sudden take $400 or $500 out of somebody who's living on a fixed income and they're in their 80s, then something's got to give. And if you're already struggling to make ends meet, now they're gonna rip $450 out of your monthly pay. And so what ends up happening more times than not, the food is what gets sacrificed. And so just out of the blue, we have people that think, hey, I've prepared, or I did what I could to prepare for my retirement, and maybe worked all the way up till they physically couldn't work anymore. And now they're just living on fixed income. And, again, my mother was in the same situation. And there's just so many Americans doing that. And I know the tendency is this time of year it's just so easy for us to judge. I hate it. I've said it before. It's so easy for us to look at and think, oh, well, I'm making it. Why aren't you doing what I'm doing?
Yeah.
But in the nonprofit space, always during this time is the best time to get new donors or new volunteers, because what happens is, and I think this is a good thing, is that we do understand the majority of us live in a very prosperous nation, and compared to people around the world, even if you think, yeah, here I'm just making it month to month, but you would be considered in the top 1% to 2% of the world, compared to what other people are making. And so, and some of our most generous people are people who themselves once struggled with food insecurity, have been in a food bank and have come out. And it's like the widow and the two mites. It's not necessarily the amount they give, but if you look at the amount that they donate to us in proportion to what they have coming in, it's a much higher percentage than maybe people who are very generous donors, but have more, have substantially more to give.
Well, let me back up just a little bit. I can think of, it's funny because of the irony here, because it was about 3 years ago I was going through a really tough time starting this business, and I mean I got to the point where I had like $16 for about a month and a half. I mean, and actually I just started thinking, okay, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. I had to tell the kids, listen, it is what it is. I was reaching out to friends. I was doing whatever I possibly could do. And of course I was on top of the world, 15, 20 years ago. And so I wasn't the point where I needed to ask for help or pantry, and I'm too proud to do that anyway. But it really made me realize it just, when I do the show, I just saw it I saw it and I heard it in a total different light. And when you're talking about 80-year-olds and their pride and how hard they've worked their entire lives, and then to finally have to ask for help, it is really, really difficult. We always talk about the social economic standpoints of being born into a poor situation and not knowing anything outside the poor situation.
Sure.
And that's just the way it is. And it's not that they want to be in that situation. It's just, it is what it is. Can you talk a little bit about your first timers and what it's like when people do have to come in? Because I keep hearing 1 in 5 children in Birmingham are hungry, and I'm like, really? And I know that's to be true, because my daughter goes over to a friend's house, and I'm like, what'd you have for dinner? And they're like, they didn't feed me, and I'm like, really? And they're like, yeah, they don't eat dinner. I'm like, really? And so they want to come over here because they know we eat. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I never even thought of it.
That's right.
Mom doesn't usually eat. She's usually,
and that's it. That sounds so strange, because we tend to believe everybody's got enough.
Yeah.
And it's very sobering. It does make you sit back and take a little inventory, and hopefully, and that's what Thanksgiving is about being appreciative of what we have in this country. We came out of a hard election. I know a lot of people are disappointed. A lot of people are happy with Trump winning, and people are all over the place. But when you peel all that back, we still live in a very, whether you're for Trump or against Trump, there's a lot to be thankful for when you look around the world. When I look at the war in Ukraine, the war in Gaza, not choosing sides, not getting into all that, but just saying wartime creates a lot of human suffering. Now, it may be for sometimes people say, well, just wars are necessary. Maybe that's the case. But there's no denying that there's a human suffering element. And boy, it's just gut wrenching, but that's not things that are on our doorstep. But yet we still battle some of those things. There's still plenty of human suffering, even though we're not in war zones and going through that. There's a real battle on our streets with people battling poverty. And so this is why food banking, the whole food banking network, we try to get the information out because we want people who fall into this for the first time, and they're you just would not believe the amount of hopelessness that hits you when you're like, hey, I'm completely out of food.
Mm-hmm.
Where do I turn to? And they don't understand food banking. They don't even know that, the difference between food bank, food pantry. They don't know what's in there, what resources are available. But I'll tell you something I especially like. When I came to the food banking network, this was kind of my heart anyway, but I was so glad to see it from the top level down at Feeding America. They put so much emphasis on how you treat clients. And I really like that. And it's something because what tends to happen is we have this mindset of, okay, yeah, we're going to feed people in need, but we tend to do it not in a dignified way. So
Mm-hmm.
one of the ways I've explained it before is what tends to happen is the first time you open up a pantry, and let's say you get 10 families, and so they come in and you can socialize with them and you get to know them. It's very relational, and you leave there like, oh, we really affected those 10 people. Well, word gets out. Now next week, 50 people show up. Now you can't do that with 50, so it gets chaotic. So you're like, well, we got to establish a bunch of rules. We got to get this place. And so what happens is you're like, all right, everybody, come stand in this line over here and listen. You got to keep the noise down. You can't be on your phone, all that kind of. So all of that then just makes it a very undignified process because you're like, yeah, we're going to feed you, but man, you got to follow these rules and you got to get in
Yeah.
line. It can be cold. It can be different. And there's actually been people who said, I need help, but I'm not coming back to this place to get help. And so when you think about here's a pantry who's well-meaning, they want to care for the community, but the environment is so bad, it's so degrading that I mean you're herded like cattle, and you're treated
Yeah.
like you're not treated just through a dignified process. So one of the things we coach and teach is, hey, you have to look at that person as being somebody of value. You don't know their background. You don't know how they ended up there. It's easy to discount that, but the truth matters. The vast majority of people are working citizens. They would be working if they could. There's a lot of disability. There's just a lot of challenges. There's a lot of brokenness. There's a lot of like households splitting
Mm-hmm.
apart, and all of a sudden, single moms and single dads finding themselves, hey, now I don't have anybody to take care of my children. Now I'm going to lose my job because I don't have anybody to take care of my children. And now you're at home, and life just happens.
Yep.
And so instead of judging that, we want to bring them in and say, listen, we value, we honor, we know life happens. We're just glad you're here. And so let us help you. Let us be a part of boosting you up. And look, if you get things turned around and you want to come back and volunteer, or if you want to come around and donate, if you want to do a food drive, that's super great. But right now, you're just in a place where you need some care and some help and some support, and that's what we're here for. And so we want people to look at us as, man, that's a good place I can go getting a meal without judgment raining down on me, or I don't feel like I want to come up with a bag over my head and all
Mm-hmm.
that. I mean, there's enough of that anyway
Yeah.
because we live in we value uh, we value people who are completely independent, and we kind of tend to look down on anybody who's going through a stage of dependence. So anything we can do to break through, but there's not one big mass way to do it. Sometimes you just have to get in there. You have to coach each pantry, each person, help them see a different perspective. And it's a real challenge, but it's so important.
Mike, we talked about this a little before we started the show. Anytime I can use the Bible in just everyday speak, I try. You're much better at than I am. You've been studying for so much longer, but I did do a reading at my church this past week from Revelation about neither hot nor cold. You're better to be hot or cold than to be lukewarm, so much so that he would vomit you out of his mouth. Of course, we're talking about the Lord our Savior. And he the homily basically was built around doing things heartily, and that is obviously with your heart. And I thought of you when I was doing this because I know how much blood, sweat, and tears you put into everything you've done, whether it was the Jimmy Hill mission or whether it's the Heart of Alabama Food Bank or wherever you work for your non-for-profits. And I was trying to think to myself, I always tell my kids, if you got to take the trash out, look at a butterfly, smell a flower. Try to find something positive about taking the trash out. Try to make something positive. My dad was a newspaper distributor for 37 years. He threw newspapers. All he did was this for 37 years, throwing stuff. His right arm was much bigger than his left arm because he really drove it, and he drove 15 miles an hour his entire life. And but he took so much pride in what he did. He knew it's what he had to do, and so he made the best of it. Yeah. And I can remember one time, complaining because I had 3 jobs. I was working Kentucky Fried Chicken, a radio station, and then I was working a money room up at an amusement park. And I was complaining because I had no time to myself. And my dad was not the man you wanted to complain around. I mean, he almost went to the belt. I was like, whoa. He's like, I don't ever want to hear you complain about working too much.
Yeah.
Because back then, when you had more than one job, it was like, wow, how'd you do that? Now it seems like you can have as many as you want.
Yeah.
Can you just talk a little bit about, is it something that we can learn? Is it something that we're brought up to believe in? How can we be more, and I think it's perfect with Thanksgiving, but how can we be more grateful for what we have in our life, depending on our situation?
Yeah. One of the things that I've heard people say, I try to convey that. And of course, there's times you could see me and you could say, well, Michael, you're not backing up your actions. Or you're not backing up your words with your
We've all
actions.
been there. Yeah.
So set aside the obvious at times being the deep hypocrisy here. But there's scripture that talks about in everything you do it as if you're doing it to the Lord. Now, and when I think about that, it's like, okay, if Jesus were here walking the earth and we had a belief in Jesus and Jesus asked us to do something, we're very likely not going to do it half-hearted. And it's because when we think of our actions in terms of faith or, walking to honor God, we're like, hey, no, God deserves our best because that's what he gave to us. And of course, that can manifest itself a 1,000 different ways. But when it comes to serving people, what I recognize is God has placed these people who are the most vulnerable in our society. So they could be taken advantage of, they could be abused. And lots of times we do see people are coming to us, a mother who's left the house because her husband's abusing her, or may have to stay because she doesn't have any choices. Or he or she may be drinking, the family money away. And so they're in a food. I mean, there's just a million different things. So one of the things I've always communicated since I've been in the nonprofit world is something John says in the book of 1 John. He says, you know how to love because you've first been loved. And what I value about that so much is God's not calling us to a standard that he has not ever demonstrated himself. So the idea that God came down, took the form of man in the flesh and took all of our sins to the cross, even though he himself was without sin, you don't find a greater love, a greater sacrifice than that. And he goes, so if you look at that, he says, all right, so you know how to love, you just go do that. And we're like, well, we can't do that. That's ridiculous. We can't. But what we can do, and what I try to do, is be a conduit of that love and start with the idea before I do anything and say, wait a minute, the standard is he loved me and he gave himself for me. So that's the standard. He establishes the standard. And so now I'm like, okay, if I want to be that representative as best as I can be in the flesh, so I'm always going to be that broken jar of clay in reality. But what's so great about him is he uses broken jars of clay very well. Like he uses this like golden vases.
Yeah.
And so the idea is I want his love. It's not a love that I generate. It's a love that comes from him, but I just want to be a conduit by which it flows through me to reach other people. And so that's why I say, and I'm this is not false modesty or anything like that. The reality is when I'm in a bad mood, then I block that love from going out to other people. So I become an impediment to that. So I have to orient my mind. And part of orienting my mind is saying, look, I want to be the best I can be. I don't have to go generate this supernatural love that because it's been given to me. All I have to then do is just let it flow through me
Mm-hmm.
to the benefit of other people. And so a nonprofit space for me is a natural way to do that. But that doesn't have to be manifest itself only in the nonprofit world. That can be made manifest inside of your family. It can be made manifest to your neighbor. It can be made manifest in your civic organization. I mean, it can just become a part of who you are. And if we were all striving and going through life and trying to say, look, I just really want to do what's in your best interest and put your best interest above my own, then God works through that to bring about healing, to relieve suffering. And so when people are hungry and they come, the worst thing I can do is stand up and judge. I'm like, no, you're hurting, and I can't even identify all the ways that you're hurting or all the pain that brought you to this point. But here's what I know: you're hurting, and I want to do what I can to alleviate that pain. Why? Because that's the God that I know that's alleviated my emotional pain and mental pain and sometimes physical pain.
Yeah, you talk about if God or Jesus asked you to do something, and I've used this with my kids. I was like, if one of your friends saved your life, how would you treat that friend? And they're like, oh my gosh, I'd do anything you asked me to. I would say, and I
Right.
said, well, that's what God did. He sent his only son to die for you.
Yeah,
He saved your life
that's
by
right.
doing that. So when he asks and he taps you on the shoulder or gives you that God wink, you better do what he asked you to do, and you better do it really, really well. Um, the idea of putting our best foot forward in everything we do, and really being grateful for everything that we have, and I try to do a gratitude thing every morning. It's interesting because they always say you can really tell the character of an individual and what they're like when no one's watching.
Yeah,
We know there's always someone watching, and that's the most important person. And it's happened to me like two or three times in my life. Well, I use the example. A good friend of mine has a son who was in this band, and I think I told you the story. And the guy's been playing seedy Nick type of places. He's 22 years old. And they go to Knoxville one night and they're playing some place where it smells like urine and there's drinks all over the place. And there's three
yeah,
people in the place. There's three people in there. And he's like, and he loves to play. And so he put on the best show he possibly could. And one of those three guys own this band called Hotel California, which is, of course, the band that Don Henley actually endorses. And they play 300 shows a year, and he's making $400,000 a year now playing this band because he put his best. The rest of the guys are kind of like, let's just get out of here. Let's do a short set. Let's pack it up and leave. There's only three people here. Well, one of those people was this producer, and so you never know who's watching.
that's right.
And
That's a
God
neat
places
story.
people in your life. Yeah, I was in Louisville, Kentucky. I just called my mom, told her I'm quitting radio. I'm coming back home. I'm going to live with you guys if it's okay, and I'm going to go back to college and get into marketing. I was hanging with a really bad bunch, and the next
Yeah,
phone call I picked up was some guy driving through from St. Louis who ended up being my next boss and said, "Man, I hear you. You sound fantastic. You want to come down to Birmingham?" And next thing that was 1988.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
and
yeah.
I just remember thinking to myself, okay, well, there's no reason to get on the radio and sound like I'm piss poor, just not happy being here because no one cares about what my life is. I'm here to entertain people and make people feel good about things. That's why we do these podcasts. We try to turn the other cheek and make people feel comfortable about that. And
Yeah.
having a bad attitude and not putting your best foot forward, whether you're a waitress, whether you're a hairdresser, whether you're Michael Coleman, you're not giving yourself the opportunity to further yourself. If you're not happy the situation you're in, make the best of it because the best stuff is on the way, right?
Well, yeah, and I, I do want to encourage everybody that look, it does. It is easier to gripe and moan because the things that cause anxiety, things that cause us stress are always ever before us, whether it's our own failures, whether it's financial stress, relationship stress, all that kind of stuff. It's so easy to focus on that. We do that by default. You have to be very intentional in the midst of that to focus on what's going right. And lots of times, the only thing that's going right is my faith. I mean, that's that God is always the steady factor that you can fall back to. And I don't mean to reduce him to that, but when you feel like there's nothing positive going on, you can always fall back and on that relationship, and what he provides, and that foundation is just so rock solid. So I want to encourage our audience this Thanksgiving to wrap your arm around your loved one, be thankful for what you have, even if you're struggling with health, if you're struggling with uncertainty, if you're struggling with hopelessness. That's not what God created. That's not what he designed to be, and he wants something better. So there should always be an opportunity to be optimistic, to move forward in an optimistic way, a hopeful way. And sometimes it's as simple as taking the focus off what's not going right in your life and help somebody through the bad times in their life to change your own perspective.
I've seen several stories again this year. I love it when it seems like it's always NFL players who end up making it big in the next level. And I forget the player that recently came back to Alabama and gave out like 1,000 free turkeys or something in his county. And I apologize for not remembering who that was, but anyway, it was a great story. Can you tell people how they can help you out during the holiday season and what it's like? How's it different during the holiday? Because I mean, people want turkey. They want turkey and cranberry sauce for Thanksgiving, and they deserve it. They should have it.
Yeah. So anytime if you're not in our area, I encourage you to support your local food bank. But if you don't do that and you want to jump on hafb.org or just look up Google Heart of Alabama Food Bank, if you want to donate, if you're in our area, you want to volunteer, we just love to have get people to understand what's going on, the challenges out there, and if it's not this way, if you're more passionate, if you're like, hey, I'm not really passionate about food security, I'm passionate another way, get out there and volunteer and get engaged with some of the nonprofits out there doing incredible work to change people's lives, and make your life. You can add that value and add that purpose because there's always somebody you can help. So just make your life be of value and make it intentional. And you do that just by serving others and loving others like we've been loved.
Super important you listen to the show. The Heart of Alabama Food Bank CEO, Michael Coleman, joins us every week from Mission Minded because we do love to give back. And we're going to have some really special shows over the next few weeks because it is the holiday season. It's time to give back. And we're going to do that. And of course, this is followed up by another show called Bite by Bite, which is specifically about the food bank. And we're going to talk about not only the good things, but some of the bad things that are happening, because around this time of the year, my friend, everyone's looking for free handouts and free gifts, and they're robbing people blind and this, that, and the other. So we're going to talk about how to protect yourself from that as well. So we'll do that on Bite by Bite. But God bless and happy Thanksgiving. We'll catch up next week.
Same to you, my friend.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Curry Radio.